All right. Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And this is our debate. We'll be doing this all month, of course. If you're just joining us and you're unaware of how this works, well, I'm going to give you all the information. This is part of our Community Election Connection Campaign 2020, Engage and Activate. And tonight we are featuring debate for the elected position of Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, which is a 4-year term. The candidates are Incumbent Chris Reykdal and the challenger Maia Espinoza. All the way up to the election, we'll be broadcasting debates between congressional and legislative candidates, state executive offices, and state judicial offices. We'll also provide you with candidate interviews and forums, informational interviews, and your opportunity to hear the pros and cons on measures and initiatives on the Washington State 2020 ballot. This is our effort to provide you with information to help you become a more informed voter. Your vote's important, it matters, but most of all, it's your vote. So we're going to try to provide you with information on your issues and with the knowledge to vote for the candidate who you feel most aligns with your concerns. Your moderators tonight will be Kiantha, Duncan. Kiantha, how are you? Hello, Kiantha.
I am well. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Kiantha is a speaker, facilitator, and moderator supporting nonprofit organizations, corporations, and higher education institutions in the areas of leadership, program and project development, DEI, and community affairs. For over 20 years, Kiantha has provided leadership to marginalized and disproportionately impacted communities. Kiantha was featured in a 2019 TEDx talk on adverse childhood experiences. Kiantha serves as vice president for the Spokane NAACP, as well as serving on numerous Washington state boards and committees. Kiantha, it is a pleasure to have you joining us.
Thank you so much.
And also Taylor-Corrine, Benton. Taylor-Corrine, are you there?
I am here. I'm really excited to be here. Unfortunately, I'm having some technical issues, so I can't turn my camera on at the moment.
Okay. Taylor-Corrine is a Seattle native and current freshman at the University of Southern California, majoring in philosophy, politics, and law. Taylor-Corrine is the Community Outreach Social Media Director for USC's Wrongful Convictions Club. Outside of USC, Taylor-Corrine was an audio engineer and radio broadcaster for us right here at Rainier Avenue Radio, and has spoken at numerous nonprofits on behalf of Atlantic Street Center's parent-child home program. She's also currently the program coordinator for our Engage and Activate Student Election Connection. These are free workshops that teach middle schoolers all the way up to freshmen and sophomores in college about the basics and importance of voting. After graduating, Taylor-Corrine would like to attend law school and pursue her passions of early childhood development and advocating for civil rights issues and ultimately uplifting her community. Our candidates tonight, once again, Incumbent Chris Reykdal. Chris, are you with us?
I am here. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being here. And also the challenger, Maia Espinoza. Maia, are you with us?
I'm here, Tony.
Okay. I am going to explain the rules. Each candidate will get a 2-minute opening statement and then a closing statement. Each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes to respond to the moderator's questions. The moderators will have the option of giving you a rebuttal, and you'll get 30 seconds on that. Now, after the break, each candidate will have 15 seconds to ask their opponent a question. The asked candidate will be given 1 minute to respond. The candidate that asked the question will be given a 30-second rebuttal. So I'm going to, in lieu of flipping a coin, because that's just going to be kind of cumbersome. Let's see where we at here. Finding my paperwork. There we go. In my left hand, I have a flip. This is the coin flip. In my left hand, I have one paper, and in my right hand, I have another paper. And it's going to say either heads or tails, whichever one you select. Maya, I'm going to give you the option of saying left hand or right hand, and then we'll find out if you're right. Or excuse me, heads. Left hand. Wait a minute. I got to get this right. Okay. I was just trying something new. I'll tell you what. This will be it right here. You say heads or tails. We'll just make it really simple.
Perfect. Heads.
Tails.
It's tails.
It's tails. So Chris, this is what you win. I don't know if the price is right or not, but this is what you get. You get the option of going first, or you can defer and have Maya go first. Now, what that means is if you go first, you'll go first with your opening statement, then you'll go first with your question after the break, and then you'll go first with your closing statement. So do you choose to go first, or do you wish to defer and let Maya go first?
I will let Maya go first.
All right. Then we are going to go ahead and get started. We will have the first question asked by Kiantha, and then you will have 2 minutes to respond. And Maya, the way this works out is that you're also going to get this first question first. So, Chris, if you wouldn't mind going ahead with that first question. Excuse me, Kiantha, if you wouldn't mind going ahead with your first question, and we'll get started.
Absolutely. Thank you both, Ms. Espinoza and Mr. Reykdal, for allowing me to be here with you today and representing Eastern Washington. So we have lots of questions for you. We've reached out to the community, and they would like some answers. They also have seen all of the other debates, so they don't want the regular questions. We have a brand new set for you. The first question is, how will your administration deal with the implicit bias of those serving our school-age children?
And this question goes, Ms. Espinoza, to you first.
And I'm sorry, did you want me to do my introduction first?
Whoa! I got ahead of myself. I got opening statements.
Okay.
Opening statements.
And then do you want me to roll into the question?
No, just your opening statement. Just your opening statement. Okay.
Understood. Okay. So my name is Maia Espinoza. I'm a mom of 2 public school aged kids, all experiencing the online education right now. But I want to tell you a little bit about who I am personally. So I grew up in a bicultural household, 2 Hispanic parents, 1 Mexican American, 1 Peruvian immigrant. And my parents met in the military in Biloxi, Mississippi, where I was born, and lived there through kindergarten. With 2 military parents, we lived all over the country. I attended more than a dozen public schools nationwide. That includes, Biloxi, Mississippi, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Brooklyn, New York, school in Oregon, school in Texas, all over the place before coming to Washington State. Even though both my parents were in the military, we grew up very poor. I'm the oldest of 5. My dad is one of 9. And they were the first in their family to go to college thanks to the GI Bill in the military. I found myself in the WIC office with my mom every time one of my new siblings was born. We were in food bank lines, always on assistance, and my parents were always gone and working. So as the oldest, I kind of grew up fast and always was, striving to do a little bit more. I knew that I wanted to help my family. And so in high school, I participated in Running Start. And so I was able to go to college and miraculously was able to go to a 4-year college. I became a single mom in my first year in college. And, thanks to the support of some community members in Lakewood, where I live, I was able to finish college.
10 seconds.
Now happily married. So I'm running for state superintendent. Tony, I think you're giving me the boot here. Is that right?
Well, now that's a wrap right there. Yep. You'll hear me say 10 seconds, and then you'll know to wrap it up. Thank you. And also, Chris, your opening statement. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you all for hosting this. It's good to see you all again. I'm Chris Reykdal, State Superintendent of Public Schools, running for re-election here, and really appreciate your time tonight. Maya and I have some similar roots, in fact, in terms of growing up with financial struggle. I'm the youngest of 8. Both parents have an 8th grade education, and unfortunately, I've subsequently lost both my parents. Kind of classic disease from poverty. A father of heart disease, a mother of lung cancer. I lost my oldest brother to alcoholism. I've lost a sister since then. So lots of struggle financially for us, a lot of public assistance. And it was actually public education where I said, man, this is my place to shine. I went there. I didn't feel like a kid on food stamps and public assistance. I didn't feel like I could do anything but my best. I felt loved and supported. And I went to a school system that I believe did that for me. So I committed my life to public ed, became first in my family to go to college, Washington State University, go Cougs. Ended up with a graduate degree. I taught public schools as a certificated teacher, served on a school board, an education foundation that really focused on closing gaps and transitioning kids from secondary to college or post-secondary. Served in the legislature 3 terms as a Democrat, and I'm in this role now. Super grateful for the work of the last 4 years. We've put an enormous emphasis on trying to close the financial barriers between high poverty communities and low property value communities and those of wealthier communities. And we've made an enormous amount of progress on that, but a long ways to go still to this day. Big stuff we've done. I think it'll probably emerge in the Q&A, but bilingual education now in 40 districts, top 15 in the nation, math and English language arts. Our graduation rates between our African-American students of color and our average is within 6 or 7 points now. Interestingly, when we control for poverty, low-income students graduating at the same rate, but big gaps for students in the upper income brackets. And so we've got a long ways to go to address the racial equity.
That's it. Thank you. Okay, now, thank you for those opening statements and giving a little window for our listeners to know a little bit more about you and where you situate yourself. Kiantha, now we can begin. Your first question, and this question will be again directed to Ms. Espinoza.
Absolutely. This question is from Miss Hill here in Eastern Washington in Spokane. And she would like to know, how will your administration deal with the implicit bias of those who are teaching and serving our youth?
2 minutes.
Thank you, Kiantha. I'm sorry you had to repeat the question, but so I think the first thing that we need to do to address implicit bias in our school system is to hire more teachers of color and specifically recruit and retain teachers of color into this profession. I don't think there's any better way to do this. I think that, trainings are great, but we need a lot more than that. And it takes having a coworker, a friend, a neighbor, someone that you know and develop a personal relationship with to make this change over time. This is not something that can be taught within a couple of trainings. And I feel very passionate about this. I actually served on the Race and Ethnicity Student Data Task Force as part of the Opportunity Gap Oversight Committee at OSPI. And one of the things that we were looking at in part of this committee was the students not filling out, or their parents rather, not filling out this now census data that indicates a child's race. And so the intricacies of this issue were that parents, for them it was optional, but for the school it was not. And so this put schools and administrators, in some cases it was the lady in the front office, put them in this awkward position to have to guess the race of the student if the parent did not fill out this information. So one of the things that we did in this task force was talk through the challenges of doing something like that and how we can make it easier to engage parents in this. I think the more that we engage parents in our kids' education, the better that we close this opportunity gap, which is ultimately a product of the implicit bias that's present in our schools still.
Okay. And same question. Did you need the question repeated, Mr. Reykdal?
No, I've got it. Thank you. Thank you. Really powerful question. How do we really examine the question of implicit bias and the impacts of it in public schools on our kids? And let's start with the facts. 85% of our teachers are white. We have just under 15% of our teachers who are teachers of color, and that varies a lot from one school district to another. So there are a lot of students who will never experience an educator of color. And we know the research is clear. If they experience even one educator of color, it increases the probability of their graduation and their post-secondary success. So agree with Maia. Part of this is recruitment, but also retention and mentorship. It is a lonely place if you are an educator of color and you're the only one in your building. You need mentorship and support. And so we've got programs in place that do that. But we are 85% white. So we do have to be more honest about the implicit bias we all have. I have it. I am a white cis male with privilege. I've had to go on my own journey and understand my own biases, and they're still there in part. So it's a constant requirement for us to be focused on this. What it shouldn't be is an option. It shouldn't be that we may or may not examine this question depending on where we live. We have recommended to the legislature that they dedicate at least one of the 3 state-funded professional development days every single year to this question of race, understanding implicit bias, understanding our contribution to that in our curriculum, the way we teach it, our understanding of our students, and how we communicate with families and parents. So it is this multiple faceted thing, which is about recruitment, retention, and support, but it is also about having a more honest conversation with those who are in the system and not giving them the option to not be a part of this conversation. Every educator, bus driver, playground monitor, every principal, every superintendent, every school board member, every teacher, we have all got to have this expectation that we're going to grow in this, and then listen to the community of experts to deliver that training.
Thank you. Any rebuttal, Ms. Duncan?
No, thank you.
And Taylor-Corrine, first question, and this question will initially be directed to Ms. Espinoza.
We know that the pandemic has exacerbated inequities that were already in place in many urban communities. What will you do to ensure that public school students are adequately prepared for higher education, particularly the class of 2021?
2 minutes.
This is such a, sorry, did I cut you off, Tony?
No, 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you. This is, this is the biggest problem that we face right now. Students that are in their junior and senior year of high school right now are really being set back because of because of COVID, but also because of the lack in equitable access to education right now. One of the things that I'd like to do is absolutely provide choice to these students. I think it's completely unfair that just because you're confined to a specific zip code, that you don't have the same option that other kids in other neighborhoods have. So I've been a big proponent of school choice. In this context, I think we can start immediately by offering a per student stipend. And I've said that this amount should be $2,500. And this is a start. This is a drop in the bucket in our education spending. But at the end of the day, I think our money in education belongs to our students, not a system. And so if our students are not getting adequately prepared, they're not doing well in online learning right now, I think it's important that we give them that choice. For some students, that's running START and taking classes either in person or online. For other students, that's attending a private school to make sure that they have that upper hand. But we need to provide options for our kids, and we can't just say, all of our kids are falling behind, so it's okay that some kids are. It's absolutely not okay. These are the future of these kids. And for, again, the junior and seniors in school right now, they're suffering the worst because of it. And the ones whose parents don't have options, the ones whose both parents are working, if they're lucky enough to have both parents, those older siblings are often the ones taking care of the younger siblings, making sure their siblings are logging on. And this is completely unfair, inadequate. And let's not go there with the access to technology, Wi-Fi, internet access. These are problems that are widespread. And it is the students right now, particularly at that upper end, that are suffering because of this.
And same question, Mr. Reykdal, do you need the question repeated?
No, thank you. Yeah, and specifically, it's a powerful question, the class of 21. That's this year's graduating seniors, but definitely an impact up and down the education spectrum through all the grade bands, elementary, middle, and high. Our guidance last year to districts in the closure was to put a serious emphasis on seniors, and we saw our districts really rally around them, making priority of limited instructional time for them. We've got graduation numbers starting to come in. Those numbers are really quite strong. Students were made a priority in those upper grades for their graduation and transition. We will face some of that this year. While we do have districts opening up literally every day now, they're mostly starting with elementary school, making a priority with the data they have on the students most impacted. That was our very specific guidance from OSPI. We said, take an equity lens on this question of prioritizing in-person time given that we are required physically to be distant based on public health, you can't accommodate every kid every day. So how will you prioritize? And districts are doing that right now across the state. I have a junior struggling through this right now personally. We've seen some rolling out really high quality instruction remotely, and others who aren't very good at it yet, to be candid with you, and it's very difficult. So I feel this very personally for him and for families across the state. Our goal is to prioritize this transition, but really to get all of our kids back in school. Got to follow the public health framework for sure. We're seeing districts rolling that open right now. Unfortunately, cases are getting back up there again, and I think you're going to see districts kind of slow some of that down, but we've had a steady rollout back to in-person instruction, and ultimately that is what we have to get to.
You've got about 25 seconds left. You are,
I yield it.
you yield your time. Okay. Kiantha, next question, and your question this time will initially be directed towards Mr. Reykdal.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Reykdal, are there any assurances in place to ensure that youth of color, LGBTQ youth, and youth with disabilities are not overrepresented in the Open Doors re-engagement program? And that question was submitted by a Spokane service provider.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have a lot of programs that try to re-engage students through very flexible pathways. Some of them are with our higher education partners, and we don't determine who chooses those pathways, but we've tried to build many ways for students to engage in traditional systems, through their local community or technical college, through an Open Doors pathway. It's a credit recovery approach. They can do this in lots of different ways depending on their district. And so I think the powerful notion of this question is the disproportionality. And it gets back to this larger question of institutional racism in our schools. We still have an education system that relies on personal financial resources. In many ways, there's high correlation to success. And so students who fall behind in credits and students who find themselves in more disproportionately impactful situation are students of color, are definitely students with disabilities and language access barrier. So there is disproportionality in these programs. I'm glad they're there. I'm glad that we wrap our arms around students who might need extra time, who might need extra resources. We make a commitment to basic ed to the age of 21 instead of just cutting kids off. And so I think it's really helpful to have these, but the fact is there is disproportionality, and it begins before K-12 and it's perpetuated in K-12 because we are still relying on private resources when we need to build entire systems, not just in education, but housing, criminal justice systems, access to healthcare. When families and communities have that, much higher probability that they stay on track academically instead of trying to catch up later on with credit recovery. So I take a whole community investment approach. I don't take a school privatization approach on this.
Okay, once again, you've got about 25 seconds. And
more questions this way.
Okay, Taylor-Corrine, your next question, and your question will initially be directed towards Mr. Reykdal.
What are your thoughts on climate change and what should be done to better educate Washington students on the employer and the environment as part of their curriculum?
Sorry, I just want to interject. Did Maya get a chance to answer that question?
Yes. Wait a minute.
On Open Doors, or was it specific just to me?
No, Maya did not answer that question. I'm sorry, Maya. You get the. Can you repeat the question, please, Kiantha?
Absolutely. Are there any assurances in place to ensure that youth of color, LGBTQ youth, and youth with disabilities are not overrepresented in the Open Doors re-engagement program?
So I appreciate what the superintendent said about trying to fill these gaps now, but I think if those metrics are in place, or if those systems are in place, they must not be working well because they continue to be overrepresented in this opportunity gap where students are not achieving compared to students with resources that are. You mentioned, students with disabilities. Our state is ranked one of the lowest in the bottom 10 consistently for graduating students with special needs. And that just breaks my heart. This we know continues to be underfunded federally, but in the recent education funding fix that we just did in the most recent years, we have not patched this system yet either. Special needs students are still coming up short on this. Superintendent Reykdal also mentioned English learning students. this is very near and dear to my heart. I have worked for a long time with migrant education students through my nonprofit work, the Center for Latino Leadership. And these students are particularly vulnerable to the opportunity gap. They're highly mobile, they're low income, and oftentimes English is a second language for them. Some of the work that I've done and what I'd like to continue to do if elected to superintendent is work with the legislature to make sure that our students like this are not continuing to be overrepresented in this opportunity gap. One of the ways that we did this while recruiting teachers of color is to be able to put forth this bilingual education bill, which incentivized bilingual kids in their communities to become teachers. If they came back and taught in their communities for 5 years, their student loans would be forgiven.
All right, thank you. And now, Taylor-Corrine, you may direct your question initially to Mr. Reykdal.
All right, Tony, did you say there was times where we could choose a rebuttal or add some?
That would be up to the moderator.
Okay.
Mr. Reykdal, would you like to rebut that?
Yeah, just add. The last 2 years, we've only had the new funding model really in place for 2 years. We've added $1 billion of biennium or $500 million a year to support students with disabilities. We passed the first ever incentive in our state so that districts have a financial incentive for more inclusionary practices. Students with disabilities, for example, who are disproportionately identified in terms of students of color, there's a financial incentive to get them in general education classrooms now. And I rate that point because that's how you change that system from having to do credit recovery. You dismantle the system in place now and you replace it with something that's more research-based. That's what we've been doing. In addition to, of course, training 30,000 teachers on those inclusionary practices now.
And so that's time. And Ms. Espinoza, you get 30 seconds also if you would like to.
Well, I would just say that under the current administration, we've already raised the local levy lid from $1.50 to $2.50. So what should have been a funding fix, we didn't fix. We're right back where we started as far as inequities go.
Okay. And now we're finally here. Thank you. Taylor-Corrine, your next question directed towards Mr. Reykdal.
Once again, what are your thoughts on climate change and what should be done to better educate Washington students on the employer and the environment as part of the curriculum?
Yeah, thank you. This is something very passionate to me. I'm very grateful to be endorsed by the Washington Conservation voters, and I had a 100% environmental voting record as a legislator. What I try to bring to this role is understanding that we won't ultimately tackle this until everybody in their hearts and minds accepts the impact of climate change in their lives and the disproportionate impact on a lot of our communities. So we now have environmental learning standards, climate change learning standards from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. Any teacher can access the ability to inject in their curriculum, whether it's social studies or economics or English language arts or anything else. There are ways to bring in climate change learning standards in that. We've invested dollars specifically in the professional learning of that and partnered with communities. The other thing we have to help people understand is this is both an economic issue and this is an issue of race. We know disproportionately this impacts communities of color based on zoning, based on where we site things, based on an inequitable access to certain jobs as a result of disproportionate impacts of higher ed and K-12 on who gets degrees and credits and credentials. This is the ultimate question of our lifetime. This is quite literally more important than virtually everything else. And it's not disconnected from race or income inequality. It is central to it. And so we have learning standards around this now. We've added to our science curriculum, but it's really got to be embedded in just about everything. We can build a fundamentally different, more racially just economic system if we all focus on climate change. It can be the greatest uniter of this country. But unfortunately, there's an entire political spectrum that still to this day denies its existence and the human contribution to that existence. And so we've got to get over a lot of ignorance before we can get to a lot of learning.
And Ms. Espinoza, same question.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the question. Certainly, this is an issue for young people. This is something that, young people, the issue of climate change have taken up in arms about. So I think kids are actually demanding this and asking about this in class. I'm glad to hear that we've got, some educational standards emerging around this. Certainly in our state, the greenest, most beautiful state in the country. This is very important to me, to my family, because we want to see a clean and healthy environment that our families are raised in. So I think it's a wonderful question that you bring up. And I do think it's something that students are asking for. To answer your question more specifically about how we can, do more in schools to talk about this, I think standards are a great way. Of course, science is the perfect place to be talking about these issues. And, there may be kids of different mindsets about to what degree either, humans are making the matters worse, what degree, fossil fuels are contributing to the problem, to what degree the United States is contributing to the problem, and what we can do to change it. So these are all issues that I think, are ripe for kids to be talking about in class. What I want to make sure that we do is provide a safe space for kids to be able to talk about these issues openly, honestly, and be able to work through solutions. But I can't wait to see some of the next science fair projects to see what kids are coming up with, because we are on the cutting edge of climate technology in our state. And I think that, there are some big surprises around the corner from our kids if we give them the freedom to do that.
All right, Taylor-Corrine, any rebuttal that you would like from one of the candidates? Taylor-Corrine?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out. Could you repeat that, please?
Did you want to hear a rebuttal from either one of the candidates?
No, thank you.
All right. We are going to go to break. And when we come back, Ms. Espinoza, you will have the opportunity to ask the question directly to Mr. Reykdal. And again, 15 seconds to ask the question, 1 minute to respond, and then a 30-second rebuttal. We'll be back with the second half of this debate for the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction right after this. Rainier Avenue Radio.
This could be the most important 30 seconds of the year. That's how long we have to convince you that you have power. Want change in your local community? Vote. Tired of government not working for you? Vote. Done with people saying nothing can be done? Vote. Finished with protests falling on deaf ears? Vote. Fed up with elected officials' empty promises? Reclaim your power and vote them out. You can't win if you don't play, and will never win if you don't vote. For more info, go to reclaimyourvote.org.
Brought to you by your local urban league.
Wash your hands, don't touch your face, wipe things down, clean up your space. When you cough and sneeze, do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Atlantic Street Center has been serving the children, youth, and families of the Seattle-King County area since 1910. We partner with families and communities to raise healthy, successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. These are a series of debates that we're doing all across the state, giving you the opportunity to find out more information, become a more informed voter, and it's your vote. Okay, you get to use this however you want to. So take a listen and see which of the candidates most closely aligns with your thoughts, with what you think, and then vote. So this is that opportunity that I was talking about earlier where the candidates get to ask each other a question. Ms. Espinoza, you will begin. You will ask Mr. Reykdal a question. You have 15 seconds to ask the question. Mr. Reykdal will have 1 minute to respond, and you'll have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. So time for your question.
Thanks, Tony. So, Superintendent Reykdal, you've attended, and your children have mainly attended, predominantly white schools. At the same time, you've been very critical of my position to provide parents with school choice. Do you think your implicit bias is weighing in on this perception that I'm somehow attempting to resegregate
And
schools?
that's it. 1 minute.
Thank you. No, I believe in choice. I just want it accountable to the public. Kids should be given options within their district, between their schools, between school districts, to publicly funded institutions. I just don't think there's any ethical basis for using taxpayer money for for-profit corporations and faith-based organizations. We see it playing out in Louisiana, Arkansas, South Carolina, and Mississippi. They are now 4 of the lowest performing states in the country because school vouchers segregate. Wealthy communities grab their voucher, they go to tuition institutions, they concentrate themselves in communities with less resources. All they get is their cheap voucher. It is a horrible public education system. The research says that it segregates. I want kids to have choice that's accountable.
Okay, and Ms. Espinoza, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
So you've listed a couple of examples in the South that haven't worked, but as we know, Hurricane Katrina devastated that area. I think it's unfair to compare those areas. We know that Washington, D.C. spends the most per student. They have the least school choice and the worst educational outcomes. I think it's time post-COVID that we try something different. And right now, parents and families don't have a choice. So I'm advocating that we test this. It's no silver bullet.
Mr. Reykdal, you have 15 seconds to ask a question of candidate Espinoza.
Can I not take that opportunity and get on to some other questions?
Sure. All right. Well, we'll move on, and we'll go back to Ms. Duncan, and you have your first question will be directed towards Ms. Espinoza, and then Ms. Espinoza, you will have 1 minute. 1 minute will now be the response time.
Hey.
So, Kiantha?
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Espinoza, what are you personally willing to do to protect school districts that are trying to be innovative in their K through 12 public education approaches?
We've got to fight for these innovative approaches. So whether that takes me being in the school district, fighting with them to make sure that we're finding alignment where it needs to happen, or it takes me fighting in Olympia with legislators or whoever's in the way of that innovation, we've got to make it happen. I'm known for my coalition building in Olympia, bipartisan, cross-organization, for-profit, nonprofit. This is what we need right now, and I will fight for that innovation. It's the platform of my campaign.
All right.
Thank you very
You have
much.
30 seconds left. Do you want to forfeit that time?
Oh no, I got 30 seconds left. I'll keep talking about it. So this is our chance to reimagine an education system in Washington state. This opportunity has been brought in our lap. Yes, COVID totally sucks, but the bright side is we can come out of this innovative. And I am looking for those ideas. I will foster and develop those. It's the whole platform. Again, was that 30 seconds? Do I have 15 more?
No, that's it now. You got about 3 left, and
All
we're
right,
done.
thank you.
Same question. Mr. Reykdal, do you need the question repeated?
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
I love this question because it's
minute.
not theoretical. It's not something that, we're going to figure out a plan for. We're doing it now. When I got into that office, I said we should give school districts the opportunity to completely rethink early grades. Let them do transition kindergarten. Go find 4-year-olds who would benefit from a jump start so they don't find themselves behind. Bring bilingual education and focus on dual immersion when they're there. Focus high schools on technical programs if they want to. Make sure students can move between them. Beef up relationships with the private sector. Give them opportunities, let them design. We have districts doing 4-day school weeks so that they can minimize transportation and give families more time together. This kind of innovation locally is important. I want it accountable to the taxpayers and the voters, for sure, but I love the innovation, and we're already doing it and building it and supporting districts. It's not theoretical for me, it's what we are doing.
All right, 10 seconds, and you'll forfeit that time. And
Can I rebut, Kiantha?
Kiantha?
So I'd like to first just let you all know that that question was from the administrators here in District 81 of Spokane Public School Systems. Yes, you may rebut.
Thank you for the opportunity.
30
So when I
seconds.
say reimagine education, I'm really thinking we need some big, bold ideas. I love that we are making incremental progress, but it's high time that we do something completely imaginative. One of the things that I've talked about is extending the school day for working parents. This is not, I think this can be optional before school
10
and after
seconds.
school extracurricular activities. This helps close the opportunity gap, helping more kids to be able to go to college and helping more parents be able to cover the cost of childcare. It's great to offer 1 day a week off,
And
but
that's
for
time.
working families, this is not ideal. We need
That's
something
time.
different, 21st century stuff.
Mr. Reykdal, you have 30 seconds if you would like it.
Agree completely, and we've reiterated with local districts that they get to build the schedule that they want to. There is no mandate about 9:30 starts and 3 o'clock finishes. They get to do what they want. They got to meet their instructional hours with that flexibility. They've got to get it figured out locally. We've even run legislation, got it passed to do year-round school models for communities that want to try that, balance the school year out
10
instead
seconds.
of ramming through instruction 6 hours a day for 180 days. Think about it more creatively.
And Taylor-Corrine, you have the next question, and that question will initially be given to Ms. Espinoza.
All right. In 1996, the Oakland Unified School District declared Black English a second language, and there have been numerous studies and articles, including one by The Atlantic, talking about the advantages of using Black English or African American Vernacular English in classrooms as it increased the reading achievement of many Black students. Would you consider this a possibility for a Seattle Public School District to address the racial disparities amongst Black students?
Ms. Espinoza, 1 minute.
1 minute. Yeah, absolutely. I think we do need to be creative, be open-minded, and have more options for students. You know, I mean, we've got a lot of Spanish-speaking students that speak a mix of English and Spanish, so I'm very familiar with this concept personally. But I do appreciate that this has been long recognized, and if it's appropriate, works, and it shows improvement for our students, better student outcomes, we should be trying it. Again, I am completely in favor of testing and trying new ideas. That's what we have to do to find out what works. So I think it's a great idea. Thanks for the question.
And Mr. Reykdal, would you like the question repeated?
No, I've got it. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is really, really powerful because it's beginning to recognize, like most other countries have, that there's no homogeneous language in any particular country. There are regional differences, there are cultural differences, there's recognizing race and child development and family and community development. So I support this now and immediately for any district who wants to do this. We've been expanding dual language. We've got relationships with our indigenous communities, our tribal compact schools who are bringing their native languages back. This is very powerful. I would say don't stop with us, because if they then run into roadblocks in higher ed, we got to push higher ed through this too and say, don't have a one size fits all approach to getting into your institutions. Focus on critical thinking and communication. There isn't one right way to do that.
All right, Taylor-Corrine, any rebuttal that you have for either of the candidates? Hello?
No, thank you.
Okay. Kiantha, your next question should initially be given to Mr. Reykdal, and you'll have 1 minute to respond.
Very good. Mr. Reykdal, this is from a community member here in Spokane, Washington, Mrs. Bitts. She would like to know, what is your administration going to do to make schools a safer place for LGBTQ youth?
Yeah, thank you. I co-sponsored legislation when I was in the legislature to really recognize LGBTQ youth in our education, marriage equality. I defended it aggressively at the ballot. But we've got to have an entire approach to this so young people really see themselves. Specifically, we had to push back on Betsy DeVos, who was trying early in her administration to tell us that some of these students do not have equal and basic civil rights. The Comprehensive Sexual Health Education Bill, we made very clear that we had to recognize the civil right protection of LGBTQ youth in that curriculum and in those studies. And so we've taken very tangible steps. I personally donate to groups and I speak before groups, pizza clutches and others that are building communities around LGBTQ youth and recognizing them as any other group or club in the school. Loving these students, respecting and supporting them means giving them access to everything and all of the supports.
And
Thank you.
Ms. Espinoza, same question. Would you like the question repeated?
No, I think I've got it. Thank you. Yeah,
1
this
minute.
is very important, and a lot of kids are asking about it. It's very topical. It's pretty simple, though. No bullying in school. We need to make sure that our kids, LGBTQ, special needs students, any student that is marginalized is protected. And that takes making sure that students and faculty are aware of some of these things that can be offensive to students. So I think it's an education thing. It's pretty simple. But at the end of the day, it's not that complicated. We need to make sure that no child is bullied.
Okay, you have 30 seconds. Do you want to forfeit that time?
Yeah, I'll yield it.
Okay. Is there any rebuttal? Kiantha?
None.
Okay.
Thank you.
Taylor-Corrine, your next question, and it will initially be directed towards Mr. Reykdal.
The pandemic has changed the way students learn, and we know that virtual learning is less effective than students actually being in schools face-to-face with the teacher and all the other resources that are available. For some students, this online learning is a disaster. What will you do to improve the academic performance of underprepared students?
1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute. Ooh. So the first thing we had to do is make sure that we could at least make it the best model we could. No state in the United States of America was prepared for this. We were one of the first to go back to remote learning last spring. Since then, we've deployed 300,000 devices, connected 60,000 families, and we're going to connect 50 or 60,000 more. Your question is perfect. There is no substitute to the supports that we create in a building. The goal is to get back. We've required districts to do academic screeners, know who was most impacted, and SEL, social emotional screeners, mental health screeners, know who is impacted, not just from an academic standpoint, but from a mental health, and put a focus on it. I've made a request of the legislature to increase by several $100 million next biennium the supports very specifically to address the needs of kids who are disproportionately impacted by this. When we recover from this, we've got to be intentional.
10 seconds.
We've got a plan to do it, and we need the legislature to resource it.
And Ms. Espinoza, would you like the question repeated?
I think I've got it. Thank you for your question again, Taylor-Corrine. So this you hit the nail on the head. Online learning has been a disaster for many students, and it doesn't matter that we were able to deploy devices, the day or the month that school started in some cases. I just talked to a teacher today that said her kids didn't get devices until a month after school started. We are way behind the ball on this, and it's disappointing that the superintendent had 6+ months to get ready for this when we closed schools in the spring. This is a disaster. This is why I've advocated for schools to reopen as soon as safely possible. We can do that, but the current superintendent has given these mixed messages that school districts should remain closed, but they can reopen. I think more to the point, if we provide parents with choice, if we offer them that voucher and they say, I'm going to send my kid to a face-to-face private school instead, these public schools are going to be reopening a lot sooner. But I want to be facilitating that conversation. Districts want to reopen, but they need that help with the connection of the local health officials, school board directors, teachers.
That's time. Taylor-Corrine, do you have a rebuttal opportunity for either candidate?
None. Thank you.
Okay. Kiantha, back to you, and your question will initially be directed to Ms. Espinoza.
Very good. Ms. Espinoza, this question is from a civil service servant here in Eastern Washington. And she would like to know, can you give your opinion on this particular subject? Comprehensive, evidence-based social emotional learning and sexuality education, why or why not?
1 minute.
Wow, this is a new term that I've learned. So we have put forth in the legislature, put forth by my opponent actually, that comprehensive sex ed law. There are components to social emotional learning, to education. How those tie into comprehensive sex ed is not exactly clear to me. So I want to kind of separate these subjects. Social emotional learning is extremely important. That's something that we're really missing out on right now during this online instruction. Comprehensive sexuality education, something the legislature did pass, again, authored by my opponent, I think I find in reading the curriculum material approved by this administration to be a very specific type of sex ed. to be clear, I'm in favor of teaching sex ed in school.
10 seconds.
I think it needs to be more inclusive, but I think that restricting the options that districts can provide is the wrong approach. And we've seen the backlash that this approach has caused.
And that's
so
time.
I want to
That's
facilitate more solutions.
That's time.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was 10 seconds.
And same question. Mr. Reykdal, would you like the question repeated?
No, I'm good. Thank you. I'll be unequivocal about this. I support referendum 90. It is not true that this is narrowly tailored curriculum. Districts get to design their own. They get to choose from the approved menu reviewed by health experts. They can grab curriculum from other states. They need to meet learning standards as they would in math or science. 1 in 6 boys, 1 in 3 girls is a victim of sexual abuse, sexual assault, or unwanted touch by the time they graduate. It is disproportionate for communities of color. It is very disproportionate for students with disabilities. We're one of only 20 states that doesn't have something like this. It is time. Trust educators, trust the professionals. It's happening in our districts today without incident. And for folks to make this a political issue was unfortunately very damaging, because it tells kids we don't actually want them to learn how to protect themselves and keep themselves safe. This was ideological and it didn't need to be. I support Ref 90 and I hope people
10
will vote
seconds. Okay. The next question, Taylor-Corrine, will be directed initially to Ms. Espinoza.
What would you consider to be key factors in teacher evaluation, and how will you improve the effectiveness of hiring talented teachers?
1 minute.
Well, I absolutely think some of the biggest components to teacher evaluation need to be evaluations from the students and student performance. And student performance, of course, is measured by a number of different metrics, not just high stakes tests, not just grades. Classroom engagement are one measure, but I think this concept of students grading their teacher is very telling. And I don't know that we do a lot of that. Maybe Superintendent Reykdal can talk about some of those. But I think those are some metrics that we do need to measure teachers by. And I forget the second half of your question about, can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
The second half of the question is, and how you improve the effectiveness of hiring talented teachers.
The effectiveness of hiring talented teachers. So we need to define what that is. I think right now we have kind of a rough scale of measure for teachers based on years on the job and what kind of education they have, the level of education they have. That does not constitute what a good and bad teacher is. And I think we do involve parents and students.
Okay, and same question, Mr. Reykdal. Do you need the question? Would you like the question repeated?
Yeah, I'll take it repeated this time. Thank you.
What would you consider to be the key factors in teacher evaluation, and how will you improve the effectiveness of hiring talented teachers?
Thank you very much. So we've got some really good framework in this state. We're finally a leader in this on teacher evaluation. The teacher evaluation system is one that focuses on growth. And so there's very specific things, including student outcomes, student learning, student engagement. I personally, when I was a classroom teacher, gave student evaluations. I evaluated myself. I wanted them to give me feedback. Man, our high school kids, honest. It makes you better at what you do when you ask those questions. And so obviously looking at the data and then looking at the performance and doing real observations and then mentorship. Give educators, particularly those early in their career, a chance to be mentored by an experienced teacher. We've built an entire statewide program around that, and we are getting incredible results. They are better educators, and they stay in the classroom longer when they've had great mentorship. But we're expanding that as fast as we can so that every new teacher has great mentorship. It's how we will keep really talented people in our classrooms.
All right. And Kiantha, this next question initially will be directed to Ms. Espinoza.
Thank you. Ms. Espinoza, what are your short and long-term plans for standardized testing in Washington State? This question was submitted by a Spokane educator.
1 minute.
So there's the official standardized testing, meaning what we are required to test standard. But then there's, I think, another form of standardized testing that we need to be doing, and that's assessing where our students are. When we come back to the classroom, we need to measure where our students are, because the gaps between the kids that are learning, the kids that have some sort of structured instruction, the gap is completely obtuse. We have no idea how far behind or ahead students are, but we continue to move them through a cohort model where age essentially determines grade. So I think in the short term, we need to assess students in a standard way. And in the long term, we need to be really critical about our big standards, the ones measured by the federal government and that are required by our state. And we need to be really critical about what those are measuring and if they're effective in measuring what we wanted them to.
And Mr. Reykdal, would you like the question repeated?
I'm good. Thank you, Tony. The federally mandated test system in this country has been an absolute disaster. We've wasted tens of billions of dollars. They don't tell us much. As you can imagine, if you test third graders now, and then next year you test third graders, what have you learned about whether or not third grade's getting better or worse, except that there's a new cohort? And so we've got to figure out how to jettison the federally mandated test. This state alone spends $15 million a year, $150 million every decade just on paying for the test companies. And we don't get a good result because it isn't measuring student effectiveness with multiple measures. We need to get back to that. Now, that said, I believe in a sampling system. We have a national assessment of educational progress that saves a ton of money by sampling our students. It tells us how we're doing by race, by age, by gender, by grade band. We can get really good qualitative data and not spend billions of dollars doing it.
Okay, and this will be the last question asked of our moderators. Taylor-Corrine, you have the last question, and initially direct that question to Ms. Espinoza.
We've touched on this slightly, but this is a question that I'm personally interested in. With the changes in federal policy impacting diversity training, how will you help white educators move beyond white fragility?
60 seconds.
Well, hey, electing the first woman of color statewide to Washington would be a start. I think, in the same way that we recruit teachers of color because they connect better with their students of color, it is about time that we have a superintendent that reflects the diversity of our students. I'm proud to be mixed, but I think this makes it very personal. So when I meet with teachers, when I meet with superintendents, school board members, this is a personal conversation. And this is more to the point that I was making earlier. It takes that personal, constant touch and approach to be able to break down those barriers. One training a year is not going to cut it. We've got to be personal. We've got to get serious, cut to the chase, cut the crap.
And Mr. Reykdal, would you like the question repeated?
Yes, please.
So my question is, with the changes in federal policy impacting diversity training, how you help white educators move beyond white fragility?
60 seconds.
I'm glad you asked the question again, because I don't want your listeners to miss this. The Trump administration and Betsy DeVos and conservatives all across this country want to dismantle things that are absolutely necessary to address white privilege, institutional racism, that could help move us to anti-racist organizations where we are actively finding barriers to success for kids and breaking it down. They don't want us to use certain words. They're trying to use a federal mandated system here of education down to the detail of the words we use in the curriculum we pick, and I think it's atrocious. So the first thing you do is you resist the federal government's attempt to take over our schools. And then you make clear that every school district has to have a plan around equity and embed it in their job training. Not just one training a year, job embedded training that is consistent. White educators have got to constantly be improving their understanding of race because we do have implicit bias. But we can't do that by having white educators teach white educators. We've got to listen to community and experts. Bring in the experts to deliver that work.
Wow. First of all, thank you to our moderators, Kiantha and Taylor-Corrine. Wonderful job.
Yes,
Wonderful job.
Dear.
Really appreciate you. Again, you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is our debate between the two candidates for office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. It is now time for our final comments, closing statements. And Mr. Reykdal, you won the flip, so you've deferred. So Ms. Espinoza, you will have 2 minutes for your closing statements, and you're on the clock.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Kiantha, and thank you, Taylor-Corrine. This was an amazing opportunity to be in front of your audience. This isn't the first time I've been on Rainier Avenue Radio, so I'm happy to be back, wearing the candidate hat. Normally, I am the director of the Center for Latino Leadership. I've been working to close opportunity gaps for a long, long time. But this March, I decided to step up to run for this position. It was pretty disappointing to me that we didn't have anybody challenging for this position. We always have got to be fighting for a better education for our kids. Little did I know that COVID would happen, shut down our schools, and dismantle the system for us. It's a mess right now, but come January, if and when I am elected, I want to restart a system with a new set of perspectives, with a fresh lens. It's high time, again, that we develop a system not only for the future economy, but disrupt this system of, systemic inequality. We've done a lot of patchwork in our public education system, especially in this state. And having lived all over the country, I can tell you we have some of the worst disparities in Washington state. Turns out it's not just anecdotal. We know that the McCleary fix, this new money that we got into education, said that putting existing money or new money into the existing system will not work. We need a new system, and this is our chance to do it. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be in front of your audience again today. I ask for your vote. You can learn more about me at maiaforus.com. That's MAIA for us.com. And again, really appreciate the opportunity, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Reykdal, your opportunity for closing statements, and you have 2 minutes, and you are now on the clock.
Thank you so much to you all for hosting this. I really appreciate it. They were awesome questions. I'm Chris Reykdal, State Superintendent. I want to just frame this very simply. This race got very ideological around a comprehensive sexual health ed bill that, quite frankly, is long due. We have students who are abused that can get quality, medically accurate, scientifically based, comprehensive sexual health education locally determined with parent power to opt out. It got worse from there. My opponent is a hard worker, and I respect her deeply. She is a Republican. She's ran as a Republican. She just got money from Republicans. I am a Democrat, and it's not that the office has to be partisan, but it tells you about the values we bring. I helped co-author the de-escalation bill because we had law enforcement who were absolutely not accountable when they committed violent crimes against our own citizens. We eventually had to take that to initiative, where I helped co-write that statement. I was the first elected official statewide to endorse I-1000, because once I-200 passed and we no longer could make a goal out of racial equity in our public institutions, we saw things fall apart very quickly. I bring a whole community approach to this. Yes, public education, we've led with innovation, we've closed gaps and we're closing them, but I am also fighting to make sure that whole communities get support, housing, access to healthcare, access to racial justice in the criminal justice system. Everything about this job has to be inclusive of all of that. It can't just be about privatizing our schools, giving people a check and saying, if we just send you to your for-profit company or your religious institution, we can solve the ills of the world. We have to be more intentional in communities and take greater responsibility in education for a complete community approach. That's what I try to bring to the work. I know I have a lot of privilege, so I've tried to build a team to help with that. And I've built policies so that districts have to be personally responsible for those outcomes. Thank you for the opportunity. Please vote chrisreykdal.org. Thanks.
And once again, Kiantha, thank you for representing Eastern Washington and your constituents in Eastern Washington. We appreciate you. And Taylor-Corrine, thank you for representing not only Western Washington, but youth and youth concerns. We appreciate you. Well, candidates, thank both of you for joining us. Again, voters, you have now had the opportunity to hear from both of the candidates. Again, it's your vote. Vote for the candidate who you feel aligns with your issues and your concerns. Or you can use it however you want to. What I hope you do is use it. And as you can tell, these down ballot elections are the ones where you have the most impact with that vote in your community. I know the presidential election kind of sucks all the oxygen out of the room, but it's important that you pay attention to these down ballot opportunities to elect a candidate. That's it. That's all the time that we have. On Monday, we'll be having a District 2 debate between Rick Larson and Tim Hazelo, and that'll be the U.S. Representative to Congress, District 2, House of Representatives. So join us for that debate at 7 o'clock on Monday. Until then, remember, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, really quick before we go, special thanks to our sponsors, Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. Thank you so much, Urban League, and Seattle Academy of Arts and Sciences. Thank you to our sponsors and who helped make this possible. Now back to what I was saying. Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are probably right. I'm out. Peace.